forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March.
Again, rebounded by Indiana. The game is over.
For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk,
Oh, he just shook the gravity.
and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger Ten. Here's Steve Deace.
And greetings. Welcome to this week's episode of Bigger Ten. I'm Steve Deace, joined by my co-host Aaron McIntire. Good to see you, brother. How you been?
You know, I'm doing okay. I think I said last time we were on here that it's getting to the point of the year where I'm like, okay, it's time to break out the NCAA football 14, start playing that again. The appetite is definitely growing. I was sending my wife a few texts the other day just saying, you know, unsolicited, 60 days till training camp, 90 days till 80 days till the Hall of Fame game, 100 days till the Hawkeyes opening game. She doesn't respond to any of that. She just says 80 days till the baby's here. So,
Have you got any college football magazines yet?
I have not. I heard you did, though.
I did. I have been too busy to read them, if given everything that's going on with our day job at the moment. And I've got a little side project called a movie going on at the same time. So this is weird for me. I've had Athlon's and Lindy's college football previews sitting on my desk at home since last Friday, and I still have not had a chance to crack them open yet, when virtually every other year I would have read these things like twice by now, you know, but it's coming around the bend, brother. It's getting here sooner than you think. Big Ten has announced officially, by the way, that Big Ten Media Days for football in person are returning this year, and they're actually going to be in Indianapolis now.
That's smart.
First time ever, not in Chicago, but in Indianapolis, July 22nd. So what we're taping this today on June 2nd, right? So that means that would be 28 more days and 50 days from today. 50 days from today are Big Ten football media days. That ain't too far away from here, if you know what I'm saying.
Sure.
You know?
It's getting real, as the kids say.
It is. You know, Nebraska and Illinois, they'll have probably, since they're playing that week 0, they'll probably open up camp shortly after that. So it is getting here. And you know what? There's actually a ton of news to get to. We had originally considered doing a topical show this week, and then with all the breaking news out there, we just thought, or a thematic show, we just thought, you know what? There's so many topical things happening. We're going to get to those. So let's get right to it. DraftKings has unveiled win totals for the Big Ten Conference. Now, we want to let you know, Rutgers is not included because DraftKings is located in New Jersey, and state laws often don't let you put lines on the local teams, okay? So Ohio State's win total is 11, Wisconsin at 9.5, Penn State at 9. Those two teams struggled last year, remember. Indiana at 8. When was the last time Indiana went into a season with a win total of 8? Michigan at 8.
Yeah, let me ask you this
Yes.
when was the last time Indiana and Michigan went into the same season with the same win total?
As soon as you stopped me, I knew you were going to cut me quick. You cut me deep, Shrek, with that. I knew you were going to say that, all right? Never, Aaron, is probably the answer. Never. Minnesota at 7, Northwestern at 6.5, Nebraska at 6, Maryland at 5.5, Purdue at 5, Michigan State at 4, and Illinois at 3. So those are the first full win totals for Big Ten teams for the 2021 season. Aaron, what sticks out to you there?
First of all, we talked, I believe, on the last edition of Bigger Ten. You know, when you're talking about win totals, I can't actually remember. Maybe we were talking about this off the air. When you're talking about win totals, you want to kind of do the math. You kind of want to triangulate a little bit there. For example, Clemson, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
If Clemson loses that game, you've already won that bet. If you took the under,
because their win total is 11.5.
Exactly.
Yes.
If you took the under on their win total, if they lose that game, you won your bet. Congratulations. Same thing happens here as well. You want to triangulate as best as you possibly can. I immediately get locked on to Iowa. I think there's a much higher chance that they start out 0-2, than they do even 1-1. And basically, if they start out 0-2, I have a hard time seeing them pick up.
Yeah, you go 9-1 the rest of the way.
Exactly. So things like that. Now, another thing that actually stood out to me. Now, Minnesota has a difficult schedule. They start out with Ohio State. 7 wins, though. That's kind of intriguing to me. I wish there was a bit of a hook there, but 7 wins is pretty intriguing to me. Another one that stood out to me, Ohio State. You would think they would be at like 11.5, or 11.5, I should say, something like that. Wisconsin, 9.5 wins. That's by virtue of their schedule. It's not super challenging. Other than that, again, the Indiana-Michigan thing that I pointed out, that's just an oddity. I'm not really looking to bet that necessarily, but I know you've probably got your eyes on those two because they play each other. So those are kind of the 2, 3, 4 things that stand out to me.
Well, a little tease on next week's episode right here on this exact same YouTube channel, by the way. On next week's episode, I should say in English, on next week's episode, there we go, I'm going to unveil my season win total best bets for 2021. And these are, I started doing these 4 years ago. They are documented 18-7-1. So about 69.3% or something over the last 4 years. I will tell you, there's going to be a couple of Big Ten teams in those best bets. Now, if you're one of our Patreon supporters, you got those numbers right away as soon as these came out, okay? But next week now, we're going to let the general population in on those win totals. I'll have a couple of Big Ten teams there, and they're both unders. I'll have a couple of Big Ten teams there, and they are both unders. Another Big Ten team, though, I looked at closely, and this is odd, Illinois. So their win total is what, 3?
3, yeah.
You're returning, what, a 5th or 6th year senior quarterback?
Yep.
Who just took them to a bowl game in Brandon Peters a couple years ago. Tell me which new coach in recent memory has been brought into the Big Ten with a previous track record of success in this league better than Brett Bielema has at Illinois. I mean, he comes in with instant credibility, right? I mean, he used to own this division, or its predecessor, the what was it, the Legends? I can't remember, but
the Legends, yeah.
But he has won multiple Big Ten championships. He's won Rose Bowls, so he comes in here with a lot of street cred. They return a lot, and they return a lot of super seniors. Like there's like 30 of these guys coming back or something for Illinois, some crazy number, right? So you've got an experienced quarterback. 9.5 is probably like tied for the highest win total Wisconsin's ever had. That's a high win total. That's a top 10 preseason team win total. But this is also a team that struggled last year. I don't know, man. Look at Illinois' schedule. They got an interesting non-conference game at Virginia. I don't think that's, I mean, it ain't like Charlottesville is some kind of snake pit, right? You know? I counted like 6 or 7 winnable games. That doesn't mean I said they were going to win 6 or 7 games, but I thought there were 6 or 7 winnable games. An under win total of 4 with an experienced quarterback, a coach with the resume of a Brett Bielema, and you know he's coming in hungry right after what happened at Arkansas, and he kind of had to go on a rehab tour with Bill Belichick for a couple of years, right, as an assistant. Am I nuts? I strongly looked at that, and then I just didn't quite have the stones to pull the trigger. But I want to say that I looked long and hard at making Illinois a win total best bet over.
Yeah, it's just so hard to say. I want to say that that's going to end up being a push. It's such a random number. You would think if Vegas really had a bead on this team, they would give him a hook or something, you know. It comes down to the whole numbers are to me anyway. When Vegas is at least with the odd, you know, low numbers. So when we get outside of the 6, 7, 8, even 9 win range on either side of that, that's when it tells me I'm not really sure if Vegas is really sure about this team. So it would be hard to see Illinois. I'm just WNLing their schedule on the fly here. Charlotte, Virginia.
Those are winnable games.
UTSA.
Winnable game.
Those are their non-conference games.
And
then
the
they
total's
play,
only 3, remember?
And then they play Northwestern at home.
I think that's a winnable game.
Not, yeah, exactly. Rutgers as well at home.
Winnable game.
So, yeah.
Could they eclipse this? When's that Rutgers game? What's the date?
The Rutgers game is October 30th.
Could they be over the win total going into November?
Depending on how
See,
Purdue...
now I'm starting to kick myself a little bit that I didn't do this.
Now, they've got Purdue as well, September 25th, and then their final...
I think that's another winnable game.
Exactly, depending on how Purdue comes out.
I mean, a lot of games are won by the team that has the better quarterback.
They could eclipse this by October 2nd.
A lot of games are won by the team that has the clearly better quarterback.
Yeah.
Is Brandon Peters starting at Purdue if he's on that roster?
Probably.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah is the answer. So now I'm kind of kicking myself for lacking the spermatozoa to make that call, okay? I will tell you what I also thought. Can you throw those back up there again? One of the axioms of futures betting is if you're confident going in, the worst you're going to do is a push, bet it, right? Mm-hmm. There were several teams here that I thought the worst I was going to do is a push. I thought Illinois, worst I would do is a push. I thought Michigan State with a total of only 4. Because I think the game that they have against BYU is way rated based on the BYU team of last year. But this year's team is not that BYU team. Mm-hmm. I think the worst you do there is a push. I wonder if Purdue's the worst you do there is a push. I wonder if Indiana, the worst you do there is a push. A third-year starter in Tanner Morgan from Minnesota, and a full year of real prep now for PJ Fleck, is 7-5. Is the worst you do there a push? There were several Big Ten teams I looked at that really tested that mantra, because I think several of these win totals, I really think the worst you could do is a push.
Yeah, no, and there's quite a few, like I said, whole numbers there, and that's what if you're unsure, but you've got them somewhere in the range that number is, you want to bet those whole numbers if you have a little bit of money lying around. Try to bet the whole numbers, because then at least the push is in play at some point.
All right, so again, next week's episode right here on this channel, on Michigan Podcast, I will unveil my 2021 season win total best bets for this season. Let's stick with football. And we've had one of those freedom of information actions that are always revealing some tasty morsels, right? This one from Ohio State, which revealed text messages, not even from like the coaching staff, the incoming university president, openly discussing at this time, well, a little bit later than this time last year, when the Big Ten canceled the season on the 1st of August, openly discussing the possibility of going rogue, going independent for one season, basically calling the Big Ten's bluff that they're not going to kick Ohio State out if they go rogue and go ahead and play their own schedule. What do you think it says that this was even discussed? I think we are not shocked if it was discussed within the football program, right? What do you think it says, though, that it was discussed at the highest echelons of the administration, Aaron?
I think it says that they actually were serious about this, contrary to a number of things that we heard in the media at that time. And they were prepared. They were actually prepared to do it. I mean, if you think about it as well, what would happen if they just said, screw it, we're going to play anyway? And they found teams to play.
Right.
Paid them a bunch of money.
Big Ten's not throwing Ohio State out of the league, guys.
Big Ten's not doing that. Heck, they probably wouldn't have even thrown Nebraska out of the league.
I don't think they would have done that either.
Wanted to do that. So I think this was a lot more possible than what they originally let on in some places in the media. And I think as well, this was a form of a big stick from Ohio State. They did a number of things around last year, but this was a big stick. If you let this get out to the press, then you had the Players United movement going on at that same time. Let them play. The cacophony of voices and opinions on playing would have just gotten too much for the Big Ten. So I don't think they even had to go to this point, but it was there, had they? I think one way or the other, we were going to get Big Ten football next year, or last year, I should say. And I think this is just another leveraging chip, but not just a bluff.
No, it also could be that these were put in writing with the intent of putting them out some way publicly in the future, which just further, and I hate saying it, but it's true. It further adds to the Ohio State brand about how committed they are to winning, even at the highest of levels, and that's why they dominate our league. You mentioned Nebraska, the most 20% chance they'd have thrown Nebraska out of the league last year. Maybe 25, which still means 75, 80% chance that Nebraska's not thrown out, which is pretty high. Ohio State, as we once said in the great movie Animal House, 0.0. 0.0% Ohio State was getting tossed last year if they had decided to play. Let's quickly switch gears to basketball. We'll come back to football here in a moment. But we did get a big basketball NBA draft declaration, potentially. Now, if you talk to people in Michigan, and I have, a lot of them think this is just a Luka Garza kind of play. Or Isaiah Livers did this last year. Guys do this all the time. You look at Kofi Cockburn did this at Illinois last year, came back. Now this year he stayed in the draft. But a lot of guys will go and explore the process, go to the combine, get on the radar of scouts, get hooked up with an NCAA certified agent so they can go through a full draft experience without losing their eligibility. Hunter Dickinson announced last week, second-team All-American, Big Ten Freshman of the Year last season, announced last week he's going to do this at Michigan. The message he put out stressed, and they even put it in different colors, I'm retaining my NCAA eligibility. So they're operating, in Ann Arbor like this is just a guy going through the process like a lot of players do these days. But we thought we should at least mention it, because should he go to that combine and blow it up and get a first-round pick with guaranteed money. Remember, he's just a freshman, but he's also 21, okay? So he's right in the wheelhouse of, an NBA draft pick, maybe even a little on the older end of it at the highest end. This could be, I would say 80% chance he's back, 20% chance he's not. But that 20%, if he were to leave, I think this throws the entire Big Ten race wide open. I think at worst, with him and Eli Brooks returning and the number one recruiting class coming in, at worst, Michigan is a clear co-favorite with, say, a Purdue. And then we have to see what happens with Dwayne Washington at Ohio State. Does he pull his name out of the draft, or does he stay in? Okay. And so at the very least, Michigan is in that echelon with those teams. That's their floor. Take him out, though, and I think it really opens the race up in the Big Ten next year. So this is just something to kind of flag Aaron and keep an eye on, just in case he blows up, stays in the draft. It certainly blows up a lot of our preseason thoughts on the Big Ten heading into next year.
I don't think he should be allowed to come back to Michigan. Does that look like a dude who's 20 years old? He doesn't even turn 21 till November.
Right.
I have maintained that. I could not believe last year seeing him play early on in the season. This dude is 19 or 20.
It looks like
19. He was 19 when the season began.
He looks like a center for the Clippers in the early 70s that Bill Walton was posting up against. Yes,
exactly. Dude is a beast, and he's only going to get better. He's only going to get better at Michigan. And obviously in the NBA, should he choose to do that, it does strike me as one of the, as you put it, the Luka Garza situation where you go and you get some feedback. And I would imagine for the legit prospects, NBA prospects in college basketball, they do get some real valuable feedback. And as long as it's available to you, why wouldn't you turn down the opportunity?
I remember when Jess Settles was the first player in our league to ever take advantage of this 20 some odd years ago. And it was a big controversy at the time, but I always thought if you get a free tryout with the highest echelon and it doesn't cost you any eligibility, why wouldn't you do this? Yeah.
But this is, I don't know, Dickinson, and I think I brought this up to you off air. He reminds me, do you remember Greg Oden or Odom?
Yeah. Odin, that's a great comparison,
for
actually.
Ohio State, just humongous but athletic at the same time.
Yep.
So he's going to tear it up in the Big Ten if he comes back.
That's a great analogy. And if it wasn't for the Liz Frank foot injury, I mean, that guy was already great, but he would have been an all-time beast and a 10, 15-year pro.
Well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, back to football. Pro Football Focus has simulated 10,000 times the Big Ten football season based on their evaluations of the teams. Here are the results. And I got to tell you, I was surprised at this. I'm not surprised that Ohio State won the league the most times. I am surprised it was only 48% of the time. I'm very surprised at that. I'm also surprised that Iowa was a clear number 2 at 17%. So Pro Football Focus is clearly higher on them than the market. Wisconsin was next at 11%. Indiana was next at 7%. Now that's because of the division they're in. If we put Indiana in the West, they're going to have a higher simulation than 7%. And I was really surprised to see Michigan at 5%, given the season they had last year, the way they finished the previous season, how many question marks they have coming into this season. No proven quarterback, a totally revamped, rebuilt defense we don't know anything about, etc. But when you look at these numbers, what sticks out to you, Aaron?
I think one of two things is going on here. Either PFF just... their analytics they're good in very specific, narrow ways, but when you take into account them holistically, they kind of suck. Case in point, and I cannot remember the exact stat. It was either the second or fewest rushing yards in the Kirk Ferentz era for Iowa. That year, Iowa won some sort of offensive line award from
the Joe Moore Award.
Yeah,
yes.
They were rated as the best offensive line by Pro Football Focus. What? Okay. That type of stuff. When you take into account analytics holistically, sometimes they paint a different picture than maybe they can be. If they're isolated to just one stat or that stat. Another thing that it could say, I should say, Big Ten is down this year. Typically, Iowa is just right here. Iowa is not a barometer of the Big Ten, typically. Usually the Big Ten kind of rises or falls around Iowa. The better the Big Ten is, the worse Iowa fares in the standings at the end of the year. The worse the Big Ten is, the better Iowa looks in the standings at the end of the year. So I think maybe those are two things that are playing into account here. Personally, I think Wisconsin and Iowa probably have similar chances of winning. I don't think it's 6 points of difference. And then Indiana, if they were in the West, what do you think their chances would be? I would say 20%.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think I ever told you this. I actually applied just for fun a few years ago to be one of Pro Football Focus's people when they were hired. Did I tell you about that at the time? And I was also just kind of curious to learn how deep of a dive analytically they really do, right? Dude, it's a deep dive, bro. You know me, I like to deep dive, and I was like, there ain't a big enough oxygen tank for me to scuba dive. I mean, the amount of attention to detail that they do in their game breakdowns analytically, you got to really love football. I mean, I love football, but I mean, you got hated it. Analytically, wow. Let's stick with Indiana for our final topic. So our buddy Brett over at Pick Six Previews tweeted out a breakdown of what Indiana accomplished last year. Its first final top 15 ranking since 1988. It achieved its first in-season top 10 ranking since 1969. Got its first win against the top 10 team since 1987. Beat Michigan for the first time since 1987. Beat Wisconsin for the first time in 20 years. First 2-0 Big Ten start since 1991. First 4-0 Big Ten start since 1987. Reached 6 Big Ten wins for the first time since 1987. And has consecutive Big Ten winning seasons for the first time since 1987-88. So guys, it's anywhere from 20 to 50 plus year droughts that Indiana has broken in the last 2 seasons. And under the radar in the last 2 weeks, Aaron, they have gotten 3 Power 5 transfers. These guys were all players that have started at their schools. And what are the schools? Auburn, USC, and Texas A&M. And the positions, edge rusher, wide receiver, and running back, meaning skill guys, athletic guys. Is it possible? So they just now have edged out Penn State for the number 3 most talented roster in my team total talent ratings, updated with those roster transfers. Could Indiana be even better than they were last year?
I believe that's a distinct possibility. Now, did they beat Michigan last year?
Yes. That ended the drought from 1987. Yeah.
That's right. Huh.
And see, I know everybody's going to say, well, we don't know about Michael Penix. He's got the ACL. Remember, the guy they had coming in, the Utah transfer, Jake Tuttle, he did just fine. He went into Madison and won that game. I almost wonder, actually, I mean, Michael Penix is a more dynamic player. Mm-hmm. But given how good Indiana's defense looks to be returning this year, the way Tom Allen likes to play, there's a part of me that almost wonders if they might be better with a Tuttle type of quarterback. Meaning a guy who kind of just
manages.
Yes, because as good of an athlete as Penix is, his completion percentage last year, Aaron, was like 56%. That's terrible for a college starting quarterback, right? So you wonder if a guy that kind of knows his role, they might almost be better with somebody like that. I wonder. I don't know.
Remember the Ohio State-Indiana game? Ohio State was just blowing them out in the first half. And then it was the fourth quarter, and Indiana actually kind of came back just a little bit. Actually was in the game, I should say, a little bit. $5 on them to win the East or to win the Big Ten, maybe.
You know, they get him at home. It's a new quarterback.
Exactly.
I think it's at least worth, if
$5.
the odds are, if you get
$5, $10.
5, 6, 8 to 1
Yep.
on winning the Big Ten, I think it's at least worth putting $5 or $10 on it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that's crazy. Whatever Tom Allen is doing over there, the players, it's obvious if you watched last year, the players have bought in. They love him. That's a really good sign for that program.
What's their mantra? Is it love one another or love each other? Something like that. And it obviously seems to be paying off for them. We'll come back, play our weekly game of Would You Rather next. And here we go. This week's Would You Rather here on Bigger 10. Aaron, this first one is for you. Would you rather bet Ohio State over its win total of 11 or Illinois over its win total of 3 if you were down to your last $100? And keep in mind, we just did a look at Illinois' schedule, and I found 6 or 7 winnable games. I would not pick Illinois to go 6-6 or 7-5. But with a win total of 3, if I can count 6 or 7 winnable games, I'm really kicking myself, by the way. I didn't pick them now. But if you were down to your last $100, what are you on? Ohio State undefeated, basically, or Brett Bielema can scratch out 4 wins?
I still think, I get Brett Bielema. Brett Bielema is a good coach. This is still overall not necessarily what I would call a good team. I always, just one of the undeniable truths about sports betting, always kick myself on betting on the bad teams. I still think this is a fairly bad team, and until I'm proven wrong, I'm going to go stick with what has proven to be somewhat reliable, and that's Ohio State. Although the case for Illinois going over the 3, and yeah, as we kind of WNL'd earlier in the show, I think that's a compelling case, but I'm going to stick with Ohio State. For you, would you rather bet Ohio State under 11 or Iowa over 8.5?
I think I would rather bet. Wow, that's a tough call. I think I'd rather bet. What do I think is more likely? That there's 2 losses on the Ohio State schedule or 9 wins on Iowa's schedule? I think I'm going to go, and this is close, under with Ohio State. That I think it's, given the losses they've had, they've got a lot of new faces on defense too. New quarterback coming in, new tailback as well. Might be going with a freshman there, Travion Henderson. That with Oregon early, Penn State, Indiana, a sneaky opening road game at Minnesota with a experienced quarterback, that maybe, we haven't had under Ryan Day yet that faceplant game. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. That maybe this is the year they go at 10-2, because I think it's harder to come up with 9 wins on Iowa's schedule than 2 games I think Ohio State could lose. But I think it's really close, man. That's why I wrestled with it here in real time for a few seconds. All right, would you rather bet Wisconsin over its win total of 9.5 or Penn State over its win total of 9 if you were down to your last $100?
I would bet Wisconsin over 9.5. I think given the division that they're in, it's more likely that Wisconsin comes up with 10 wins and their schedule as well.
Non-conference game with Notre Dame isn't scary at all there?
Well, I would take that into consideration. But
I mean, Penn State's got Auburn, but that's with a new coach and everything else. But yeah.
Yeah, the division, and then one of the crossovers is Michigan. I'm still dubious about Michigan, but the division that they play, Wisconsin doesn't have to have this year a Jonathan Taylor or an outstanding or a Graham Mertz versus Illinois every single game in order to have a chance, or at least, or not to mention be favored in most of their division and conference games. So I'm going with Wisconsin over 9.5.
You're not worried at all about a team that in a year when we saw culture programs ascend, like Northwestern in our conference, for example, in a year that was where culture mattered more than ever because of the lack of an off season, getting everybody together with the same protocols and obeying the protocols and everything else. And we would have guessed Wisconsin was maybe the strongest culture program in our league. And they fell apart, Aaron. They fell apart. That doesn't give you cause for pause. You're totally willing to say that was an aberration. We're back on the Badger bandwagon.
Oh no, I would be worried if I was a Wisconsin fan, but kind of like what I was saying earlier with Illinois, you got to show me that that's the case. Sure. Because you can still chalk this up as a one-off.
Yeah, you can.
This year it could be a coincidence, but in football it doesn't quite work like that. Final one for you. If you could parlay 2 over-unders, which most books won't let you do.
Which I hate. Yeah.
Would you rather bet Illinois 3 and Michigan State 4 over, or Penn State 9 and Purdue 5 under?
I think I'd rather bet Illinois and Michigan State over. And here's why. I don't think either one of those teams head-to-head are as holistically good as either Penn State or Purdue are, but I actually think they're both going to have better quarterbacks. I think Brandon Peters is a better quarterback than Sean Clifford. I think he's clearly better than anybody that Purdue has. Michigan State's got this kid from Temple who has played a lot of games, and he's not great. You know, I mean, we're not talking about a guy whose gifts and tools, have you wondering where he's going to get picked in the NFL draft. But he's played a lot and he's won a lot, and he's kind of, kind of the gutty leader type, Anthony Russo from Temple. He's played in bowl games. He's played in primetime games. And I think Anthony Russo, from what I've seen, is better than Sean Clifford too. I think he's better than anybody Purdue has as well. So I don't think either one of those parlays I would bet, either one. But if I had to, I'm going to ride the parlay that I think has the superior quarterbacks. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yep.
That's a good question, though, too. You made me think about them both times. All right, we'll come back with our feedback of the week here next. This week's feedback of the week, this week's Twitter poll. Got ahead of myself. This week's Twitter poll, we asked you, which Big Ten football coach is most likely to be fired after this season? Jeff Brom, 14.7% at Purdue. Scott Frost, 27.8% at Nebraska. Jim Harbaugh, 57.5% at Michigan. Now, this is a bit of a technicality. I don't believe...
Exactly.
I don't believe with any record Michigan would, quote-unquote, fire him.
Yep.
But I think they would agree to go their separate ways, and they would save him the indignity of one of their greatest living players ever. Third in the balloting for the Heisman Trophy, first Michigan quarterback to ever be a first-round pick in the NFL draft. Unless there was some just sordid scandal we don't know about that would emerge, I don't believe there's anything you could do to get fired. They would just agree to part ways. But you get the drift of what I'm saying. I mean, when I ask that question, what do you think of the results, Aaron?
Yeah, I was going to say somewhat the same thing. It's semantics, but necessarily with the spirit of the question. But same thing with Scott Frost for the same reason.
I think the same thing would happen there too. Barring scandal, they would just go their separate ways.
Otherwise, it does make sense. I mean, Jim Harbaugh of those three names has had the most time to do the most with the most, and he has gotten not the most out of his time and his talent. So. I'd pretty much agree with those.
Keep in mind right now, Skip Holtz at Louisiana Tech has a higher buyout at Louisiana Tech than Jim Harbaugh does.
Yikes.
Lowest buyout in the Power 5. So that brings us to the feedback of the week. This is from GP in TN. So GP in Tennessee. He says, I think Michigan and Nebraska will have better seasons this year. Purdue could struggle, and that'd be the death nail for Jeff Brom. And he should have went to Louisville when he had the chance. I think that latter part looks pretty smart right now in hindsight, right? But it's hard to go back and tell a guy that Rondale Moore is not going to play another meaningful game for you basically again, right? Hard to walk away from coaching Rondale Moore.
Shellacked Ohio State.
Yes. But the way that it turned out, it's unquestionable that he should have taken that deal. The way things have turned out, I don't know, man. Have you looked at Michigan and Nebraska's schedules? I mean, I don't see a huge ceiling above their win totals on the schedules. I mean, Michigan playing Washington early, who won the Pac-12 North last year. Nebraska at Oklahoma early. You know, I mean, I can see a Michigan, if they beat Washington under the lights, you get confidence from that. I don't know that trip to Stillwater. I'm sorry. I don't know if that if that trip to Norman's going to be a big non-conference confidence boost for Scott Frost's team, if you know what I'm saying. I'm not sure they're walking out of Norman feeling really pretty good about where they're at. Maybe they kind of want to memory hole that game.
Was it the Oklahoma AD or the Nebraska AD who put out a statement about complaining about the game not being in prime time?
It was Oklahoma. Nebraska tried to get out of the game earlier this summer, remember, until Nebraska media found out about it, and they got shamed in the media, and they said, no, we're going to play the game. We're going to play the game. Yeah.
See, I think Nebraska was probably pushing for this game to be at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning or something.
Yeah, Oklahoma wanted it in prime time, but it's Fox's week. Yeah. And it's that big noon thing, I think is what it is. So, well, good stuff, man. A lot of good stuff to cover here. This episode of Bigger Ten, getting closer. Remember, just 50 days until Big Ten football media days. Don't forget as well to like, rate, subscribe, 5-star review, share, whichever the case may be, right here on YouTube or iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play. However you access Bigger Ten, leave us 5-star reviews if you like the podcast version, by the way, and follow us on Twitter at Bigger Ten to keep up to date on what we think all things Big Ten in between episodes. For Aaron McIntire, I'm Steve Deace. We'll see you next time right here on Bigger Ten.